virtual meeting. Directions for accessing the virtual meeting were posted on the district website, www.shsd.org. I would like to take the opportunity tonight to introduce our new business administrator, Ginny DeMarco. Welcome, Ginny, and we are very much looking forward to working with you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Ginny, roll call.
Mr. Baker?
Here.
Ms. Cooper?
Here.
Mrs. Frenda?
Here.
Mr. McDonald?
Here.
Ms. Nathans?
Here.
Mrs. Santoro?
Here.
Mrs. Tober?
Here.
Ms. Virtue?
Here.
Mrs. Rye?
Here.
And Mrs. Lees?
Here.
Mrs. Lees?
Okay, Ginny, correspondence?
We had a letter, the board received a letter from Carol Palmer of Bernardsville, New Jersey. The letter is included in your board packets for your review. In essence, the letter states that as a longtime resident and taxpayer, she would caution the board and look closely at the stipend issue in regards to Shay. She has no problem if the stipend is paid for work that is performed, but if the stipend is for work that is not performed, it should not be paid. She talks about the issues that we are all facing as a community and that it would not, that this would be fair. And we also had an email, which I did not get, so we will put that on the minutes, unless you can speak about that, Jamie.
Yes, we had an email from Stephanie McGrath that talked about us approving coaches for the fall season. Okay, now we have the report of the superintendent. Dr. Dempsey and the admin has been working very hard on this presentation for the opening of schools. So here we go. Gretchen?
Good evening, everybody. I'm glad to hear that the thunder is letting up. I was a little concerned about our connectivity this evening. I am going to share a screen with you all now, and hopefully that will work well. You should now be able to see my presentation. This is a presentation that has been seen by a number of people previously. All board members have seen this in their subcommittees, as the Restart Committee volunteers have as well. So, without further ado, tonight I'm going to be speaking about a number of items. This is a little bit of a table of contents for you. I want to talk about the guidance that the district and other public districts have received from the New Jersey Department of Education, entitled The Road Back. Make clear some facts that guide our efforts. Speak to the fact that the way this document is laid out, there are minimum standards that all districts have to meet, as well as laundry lists of additional considerations, which are supposed to guide our thinking. Talk a little bit about the structures that the DOE have put in place to support this work in districts, the idea of this Restart Committee that I mentioned, and the subcommittees, which will begin their work shortly, as well as the building level pandemic response teams. I want to make clear that there is some guidance in the document that I think we have tried to kind of hold on to in navigating things this complex. It's often easy to go down rabbit holes, and so I think it helps us a little bit to have some overarching guidance in terms of questions we should ask ourselves in making decisions. I will go through the recent parent survey results so that I can talk to you about what was revealed through those surveys. I thank everybody who took the time to complete those. We had a huge response rate, and that really has helped guide what we have considered in the district. So often we've talked about the fact that it's very hard to find any solution in all of this that will make everybody happy. And so I'm grateful for the fact that so many people took time to inform our decision making. I'll talk a little bit about some common hybrid models of instruction that you have probably heard discussed in other communities, talk to you about the proposal that we have for September, and then just what we have done up till this point in the last few weeks, and then where we are going from here. This presentation will be posted on the district website tomorrow. I will also send a letter out to the community so that everybody is informed. I did not want to share it before I had an opportunity to walk people through it publicly. This document, the road back, is one you may have already considered. There are two versions of it. There's a 104-page document that has all of the nitty-gritty, and there's an executive summary that's about 7 or 8 pages. A couple of things I think it's important for us to hold on to. The first is that in this document, we are directed to open in some capacity for in-person instruction and operations in the fall. That is what is driving so much of our work. That is a non-negotiable as far as the guidance we have received. There is a recognition of the fact that this reopening will have limitations that will be necessary to protect health and safety. And we also have to keep in mind that this is all subject to change, which I think is hard for us. The way schools are structured and the way they have run has been largely unchanged for decades, and we can debate the pluses and minuses of that and whether we have done enough to move forward from models that were developed long ago. But the bottom line is that we have had lots of opportunities to practice schooling under those rules, and we have had little chance to practice under this new world that we inhabit. In terms of the standards that are included in this document, they sort of create a strata, if you will. There are standards that are included. The state indicates they are there to ensure that public health and educational health are both equally considered, and that one does not come at the expense of another. These are the standards that every district must incorporate into their reopening plans. And I point that out because one of the things I think is somewhat confusing is that we're engaging in this work as we move forward to make lots and lots of decisions around a host of questions, and yet we are charged with submitting a report to the DOE 4 weeks in advance of the start of school, which, if we keep the start date where it is currently, would mean we would have to have this done in a week and a half. I want people who are engaged in this work to know that that does not mean we have to make every decision in the next week and a half. It means that the district has to document for the Department of Education that we are assuring that we are meeting these minimum standards. There are lists of additional considerations that we are all thinking about, and certainly your administrative team, as I know the teacher leadership we're all engaged in conversations with our colleagues across lots of districts. I know parents are doing that. I know board members are doing that. So there's a lot of comparison and a lot of dialogue. And I do remind myself most often in the middle of the night, that we do have some weeks to kind of iron out a lot of this. Two structures that are included in the guidance that we have started, and I think it's important for us all to understand, is this notion of a restart committee. The restart committee is supposed to support the coordination of the overall reopening plan. And we are so fortunate to have many parents who have volunteered. We have students, we have SHE representation, we have teachers, we have administrators, school board members. So there are over 50 people who are engaged in this work. And in order to do that effectively and efficiently, the district decided to develop some subcommittees so that smaller groups can focus on specific areas. Once school opens, each school will have a pandemic response team, and that team will focus on the actual implementation of this decision making. I think we can all imagine that once we start this, we're going to find ourselves in places that perhaps we need to revisit, rethink, pivot. And so these pandemic response teams will work to have those local building level conversations. Principals will lead these, and they will serve as the liaisons to my office so that we can ensure that what we are doing across buildings is as coordinated as it can be. These are the restart subcommittees that we have currently formed. The people who volunteered for the restart committee were presented with a survey in which they could prioritize their choices, and anybody who completed that survey should have received an email indicating what group they would be working with. To go through these just on a higher level, we have a group that is led by our curriculum supervisors and our athletic director that will be looking at teaching and learning across the district, as well as co-curriculars and sports. Our health and safety team is led by our business administrator. She heads up facilities for the district, as well as our supervisor of nursing. So we're trying to look at this from both a facility standpoint and a health guidance standpoint. That work will be informed by our building nurses, by our district physician, and by our local health officer. One area that this plan is focused around speaks to the challenges that we anticipate in terms of welcoming students and staff back to buildings, and the recognition that that re-engagement comes with some anticipated challenges around mental health and social emotional needs. The committee is going to be led by Colleen Butler, who is the assistant superintendent and was our director of guidance, and Jamie Walker, who is the current director of guidance. This work will focus on how to support the well-being of educators, provide professional development, or at least craft it, I should say, perhaps not provide it directly, so that we can cultivate staff's social emotional learning competencies and help to create emotionally and physically safe spaces for our students and staff. Each building will have an operation committee that is to be led by the principal. And lastly, there's a student services committee that will again be led jointly by Colleen Butler and Jamie Karansky, who is our director of student services. This will ensure that the myriad needs of specific populations can be carefully considered. I think it's important to note that some of this work will certainly have overlap. One of the things we're all talking about are screening processes. And when you think about that, you can see that it would have a health and safety component. Certainly, there's an operational aspect to it as well. And I could argue there's probably a mental health support aspect to it too. I think these questions, I don't know that if I were putting this document together, I would have buried them on page 47. I might have put them on the second or third page, because I think they give us guidance in what we should be sort of holding as a lens as we look at the choices that we have to make moving forward. These are the questions that the state has said we should consider when we're looking at policies and practices and thinking about how COVID-19 response changes should be considered. The notion of social distancing and how a change is going to encourage that distancing. the notion of mixing student cohorts, such as what might occur at lunch periods and recesses, assemblies, and how we can discourage that. This is directly related to the contact tracing that we will be responsible for. We should obviously be considering whether changes will encourage and improve hygiene, and then how the change that we're considering will impact mental health and wellness of students, staff, and the entire school community. Da, 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 da. So I've spent a fair amount of time over the last 2 weeks looking at the survey responses, and it's interesting that over the course of that period of time, there are a lot of trends that didn't necessarily change. They stayed fairly static. This distribution of responses is one of them, which makes sense in that we asked parents to complete a survey at a student level. We had some conversations early on about whether there could be questions that spoke to specific students and then others that spoke to families. And we decided that it would be easier for us to make sense of this if perhaps every response was just kind of tied to a particular student. So this does match the distribution somewhat of our student populations across the buildings. As of Sunday, we had an 85% overall submission rate. If I look at the number of students I anticipate coming in the fall and how many responses we received, we had over 1,500 submissions. So that speaks to the level of engagement, I think, of our community for sure. We were interested to see if how parents felt about sending students back to school. At the point the survey was launched, we did not definitively know that that was something that the governor was going to allow. There were districts that had put out decisions indicating that they would permit parents to do that, but on the part of superintendents across the state, there was some uncertainty around whether that was actually permissible and where that was documented. Over 200 superintendents did write to the governor over the weekend, and so I think we were all happy when we saw early this week that he released the decision to say, yes, people would be able to decide this for their families. The percentages across this have grown slightly since the initial responses. I think we started at about 10 or 11% of people saying, I'm leaning towards continuing learning from home. And as of Sunday morning, we were up to 14% of our parents saying that, I should say 14% of our students whose parents indicated that they would prefer if they remained at home to receive purely virtual instruction. In looking at the models that local communities have put forth, there are some similarities across them. One thing that tends to separate them is this notion of whether people are coming to school every single day, and by people I do mean students, or are they kind of alternating days? And typically that alternating was full instruction, although I think since the survey was launched, I have learned of more that may be leaning toward alternating days that are not necessarily full days. One of the challenges that we face in this work is how to balance the academic losses that I think we are all concerned about, with how to ensure that we are safe, that we are guiding these decisions with the questions that I shared with you previously. I think it's interesting that across all three buildings, when asked the extent to which it was important for a student to spend some time in the school building every day, even if it was just a couple of hours, that seemed to be consistent across all three, that about 80 to 82% of our parents indicated they thought that was important for their children. The extent to which it was important to have alternating full days, I think it makes sense that that might be perceived differently, so that for younger students, there are issues surrounding childcare, there are issues surrounding independence that are perhaps not felt as students get older. So I think when you look at those red bars and see how they sort of grow from Bedwell to the middle school to the high school, that makes sense to me. I do want to say that these are the kind of things that helped make some of our decisions pretty clear, because the fact that across all buildings, people said, yes, it's important for our children to be in the building every single day, drove a lot of what you will see coming forth. When asked what the focus for in-person instruction should be, most people wanted to see the time in school focus on core academics in all three buildings. That does present challenges when you get to the high school in ways that it may not present when you're looking at elementary school. Certainly just from a teacher certification standpoint, as you get into the middle school and high school grades, teachers are certified in specific content areas, and scheduling around only providing subsets of instruction during the day looks very different and feels very different. The principals are certainly aware of this information, and they are working at all their buildings to think through how to craft specific schedules that respect this information, but also respect the fact that, you know, kids are different at different ages, and we need to make sure that what we provide for them is appropriate based on their ages. When asked what safety measures parents saw as important or very important across a number of items, again, it was pretty clear that large numbers of parents, the majority of parents, recognize that reducing the number of students in a classroom or on a bus to strive for social distancing was very important to them, that maintaining social distance of 6 feet to the greatest extent was important to them. The use of face masks was seen by 80 to 87% of people as important across those buildings. I think something like cafeteria access may be more important to the administrators in crafting schedules than perhaps parents might see. We do link that very much to this notion of cohorts and grouping students to minimize mixing. One of the things I realized when I was reading through the comments, and I have read through all of them and they've all been shared with the full administrative team, is that there were questions surrounding safety measures that I realized we didn't ask about because, quite frankly, we just assumed that people realized we were going to do some of these things. So I did want to include them on this slide. Things like increased routine cleaning, hand sanitizing stations, modifying routines to ensure that everybody has opportunities for increased hand washing, screening procedures, contact tracing policies. Those will all happen. So that's why all of that was eliminated from the survey, in that we kind of thought, well, we know what we are charged with doing and what we believe is important to do. The open-ended comments were very interesting. I thank all the people who took the time to write them. As I said, I did read all of them. And in thinking about how best to share them with the community, I thought about the categories that they fell within. There were certainly many people who spoke about their concerns for safety, concerns about a particular child, about family members, questions about how the school would be cleaned and disinfected, concerns about whether the plans that we were going to put in place could be successfully implemented by either this particular child or by other children. There were parents who shared what a particular child was going to need upon return to school. very much tied to services that were unique to this individual. There was also a real dichotomy between two different viewpoints. There were questions about whether this whole decision was too soon. People who asked, why are we talking about this if we don't have a vaccine yet? People who mentioned that, you know, while their virtual learning experiences might not have been perfect in the spring, that given all that was going on, they did see them as largely successful, and they just felt the whole decision was best put off. And then there were people who spoke about a desire for school to return to the way it was before any of this started, that traditional full-time schooling was what they were hoping for, and that some mentioned that as taxpayers, they saw that as, you know, something they were entitled to. There were some that talked about this desire for purely virtual instruction and how it needed to improve beyond what was delivered in the spring. That while, you know, they recognized that we had entered into this world in an arena that was an emergency, that they were looking for growth beyond the experiences as they were provided back in April, May, and June. There were people who spoke about the recognition that school is more than merely academics, that students miss their social connections, their friends, the connections that they had with teachers, their co-curriculars and their athletics. And I'm grateful for all that shared their thanks for the work that's going into this. I have to say that in the last few weeks, I have met more people that have said to me, I don't envy you, than I have ever before in my life. And we are grateful as a team to know that, you know, people recognize that this is difficult and not work that is smooth or that is decisions that are easy to come by. In looking at the common models that we see around us for hybrid instruction, hybrid being that mix of some virtual and some in person, you will hear many districts talk about some form of rotation. There are people who are rotating on a daily basis. There are people who are rotating, or districts, I should say, who are rotating on, you know, 2 days in and 2 days out. More recently, some of them are looking at rotating a week in and a week out, and sometimes even 2 weeks in and 2 weeks out, based on knowledge of the virus. Typically, these can include one completely virtual day per week. I should note that that is something that we are still waiting for guidance on. Nobody is definitively sure that that is permissible. And typically in those rotations, school can be a full day or a partial day. In terms of the pros, one of the things that's challenging for us is this notion of transportation, because as much as we would like to think of transportation as being the tail, and we don't want it to wag the dog, there is real financial implications around transportation. Typically, routes go out to bid well in advance of school years, and there are huge dollars tied to these. I want everybody who's listening to realize we have a little bit of an advantage in that our district has routes that we contract out, and we also have our own buses and our own drivers, and that gives us a little bit more flexibility than some districts do not. Most who are looking at rotation will speak to this notion of, I need to keep my bus routes largely unchanged. There's also the talk of it providing dedicated opportunities for cleaning buildings. In terms of the downside, there's the sense, certainly, that students are not in school every day. We saw from our surveys that that was something that was important to parents. We also know from a standpoint of acclimating back to routines and mental health concerns that we believe it will help students if they have these routines established, and they're more familiar, certainly, if they're in buildings every day. The other model that people have been talking about, and those of you who have heard me speak of this before know that I always refer to this as the Chatham model, this notion of, some in-person instruction every day, but often it is the full student body in school simultaneously. It's often proposed for fewer number of hours a day. It certainly has the benefits of helping everybody get used to those new routines, and mask endurance is less of a concern. I think when you talk about rotations where students and staff are in the building for long hours in a typical school day, there is some concern around that. I have heard there again, people fall on both sides of that. There are those who have told me that, it's just a matter of getting used to. And I can only speak for myself that as I have ventured out into the world more, and I've expected myself to wear a mask for longer periods of time, I have gotten better at that. But I would never say I'm unaware of the fact that I'm wearing a mask. The concern with that last model, this Chatham model, is that it limits the ability to practice social distancing. Certainly, bringing everybody into the building simultaneously is something that seems to go contrary to the guidance that we have received. The proposal as we're currently looking at it, and I want to frame this around, we have all heard the word flexibility used often, and it's hard to approach something like a school schedule and say, but we need to be flexible. But we do. We've been told we need to be ready to pivot back to purely virtual should the need arise. We also know we are committed as a district to look at data, to talking to our neighbors, our friends, and then kind of comparing notes and seeing what works and what doesn't, and how we can change things to stay on a trajectory of continuous improvement. So this is what we are looking at for the launch of school, but I in no way, shape, or form want anybody to look at this and say that means this is the way it's going to be forever and ever. We are proposing in-person instruction daily to some degree, focusing on core academics while students are in school to the degree that we can within each school. The principals and the supervisors will be working with teachers and these operational committees to kind of look at how best to do that, and then having some daily instruction remaining purely virtual. The pros of this certainly are that students are in school every single day. Their mask endurance, at least initially, should not be overly a concern because we're not going to be in school for too long each day. And we will be more able, certainly, to practice social distancing. I spoke a little bit about the fact that one of the reasons we feel that we are able to do this is that we can kind of navigate transportation. I thank Ginny DeMarco as a new business administrator. She's only been on the job a few weeks, and she's kind of jumped into this and helped really analyze, what we're looking at, where parents are willing to waive transportation, and how we can put something in place that will work. We've looked at train schedules, so we feel like, from a standpoint of launching, transportation should be doable. She also heads up facilities and has worked tirelessly with Doug Lucas, our director of facilities, who has worked in the district for years, and he knows our spaces well. He has measured them. We have gone through calculations, and he feels confident.
Excuse me, Dr. I hate to interrupt you, but I'm being alerted to the fact that our meeting is maxed out, and there's about 25 people waiting to get into the meeting, and they can't get into the meeting, which is a problem.
It's not a problem I can solve right this minute.
No, we
certainly.
can't solve it.
Do you want me to?
Find
We have about 4 more
platform.
slides. Do you want me to go through them, Jamie, or do you want me to stop sharing the screen? I think if people close their cameras, it might improve our bandwidth. I don't know if that's something people are comfortable doing, but it's worth a try.
I don't know. I think there's a maximum. I'm being told there's a maximum amount of people.
Dr. Dempsey, this is Jeremy.
Hi, Jeremy.
We're maxed out at 250 attendees to the meeting. We can't have any more people join.
So
Derlise, I know Derlise is here. Does Derlise have, I'm going to stop sharing the screen at least, and maybe we can kind of go from there and see how best to handle this. Jamie, maybe just give me 1 minute, because I can't obviously help those people, but we really do have very little left. I wanted to share a proposed sample schedule for students, which is not finalized, but speaks to that idea of an AM cohort, a PM cohort in the buildings. And then I just have some laundry list of all of the things we have done so far, all of the things that we will continue to do, and then what people can do reaching out for questions. As I said, this will certainly be posted tomorrow.
Okay, so why don't you finish your slides, and then I think we're going to have to come up with a different platform so that we can go through the rest of the meeting, because we can't fit everybody.
There is
Perhaps people could dial in instead of video. If they call in on their phone.
It's maxed out no matter which way you get in.
Oh, okay.
somebody included in the chat that, and yes, thank you, Mr. Caldwell, this is recorded for those that are interested, so it's not as, and they can certainly keep trying. The other thing is somebody, Jenna McCready, thank you, she said if people are on multiple devices that perhaps, you know, they can change that, but I certainly do not have the power to, to expand our ability.
So what do you think, Josie?
So your options are to continue the way you are doing. You're recording the meeting and you're going to post it so that people will have access to look at it tomorrow after you've posted it. And you've already said that you're putting the presentation on the website. The other option would be to, you could stop the meeting, cut off the meeting short, and then reschedule it using a different platform that would allow you for a much larger number of people to participate. If you do that, of course, you have to follow the, as Ginny will know, you have to advertise it again, and it would be a minimum of 48 hours notice in order to advertise the new meeting. So those are your two options, and you know the whole board would have to chime in on it. So either stay where you are now, but you're, you know, you're limiting. It's almost, if we go back to pre-COVID days, it's like being in a room. You know, if you're in an auditorium that only allows 300 people, and you end up with 600 people showing up. What would you do then? In those cases, sometimes what we would do is to cancel the meeting and move it to a different location on another day. So that's kind of the equivalent of what we're doing here tonight. So those are our two options.
Thank you for those who suggested Zoom. We have tried not to use Zoom in the sense that we are a G Suite shop, and so we're trying to use Google products. But I certainly suggestions around streaming and other mechanisms are ones we have considered. I don't know that we thought we would come up against the 250. Quite frankly, This is a first. So, Derlise, I appreciate your advice around, you know, the analogy of a physical space. Some people are, Jamie, I don't know if you're monitoring the chat. There are people who are saying, you know, please continue and make arrangements for the next meeting. One thing that we have talked about as a group is that, you know, this plan that we are putting together and the policy guide that will go along with it the policy guide especially will require 2 readings. And so the likelihood of the board having to have a special meeting fairly soon, again, is high, because that would give us an opportunity to have 2 readings and have that in place and adopted by the start of school. Most people that I see are saying, please continue, please continue. People will pick up on the website.
One suggestion that was just put up was to post the presentation on the website now so that people could take a look at it and email you questions. That's another option.
Jeremy, can you do that for me?
I'm on it.
He's on it. Jamie, what are you thinking?
I don't want to shut anybody out. I hate to stop in the middle of this. I'm wondering if we could finish the presentation and have people
The presentation, I mean,
you're almost finished.
I finished the presentation. Those last slides I went through rather quickly, but certainly, you know, I think the bulk of what there was to share is there, and I'm comfortable with.
Can I have some input from the other board members?
Yes, I do think we should continue this meeting because time is of the essence and all this information is very pertinent. Your presentation will be posted. This meeting will be posted so people will hear it even though it's after the fact of when it's happening. And as Darlene said, maybe if there are any other questions, they could be emailed. But I do think we should continue it.
I think we need to continue as well, Gretchen.
Yes, so do I.
We
should continue, but can we go back to the last couple slides so people can see them a little bit more clearly?
I agree with that.
And I think the other thing too is a lot of people are watching to see your presentation and they will not have any questions. Some of them have to wait to the end of the meeting to ask questions. So the 250 might fall down, you know, once you finish the presentation, and the board members are going to ask some questions now, and then we're going through our regular meeting, and then the public asks questions. Okay, so just so everybody in public knows the procedure. But I think the 250 will drop down because I don't think everybody has a question or a comment, but I could be wrong.
All right, so I am going to go back to my presentation and I will pick up on the slide that I left off on.
Okay.
Okay, so we were talking about the proposal for 2020. We were talking about the hybrid of the hybrids with an AM and a PM shift. We were talking about the fact that this was something that we feel we are able to put in place because of the way transportation hangs together. One of the things I did not mention is that in planning for this year and budgeting for this year, the board will recall, as the public will, that the rotate and drop schedule at the high school was discussed. One of the things that we knew we needed for that was increased custodial staff. So we added 2.5 positions. As such, we have more custodians than we had at the end of last year. And Doug feels confident that they can dive into this need to address spaces in between the AM and PM as carefully as we need to. This is the sample schedule for students that I shared. Again, not finalized, solely an illustration, gives an idea of this notion of, you know, when you come to school, when you're there, how much time we would need for cleaning. We talked administratively about having a softer start for the beginning of the year, so that maybe the first week of school, rather than trying to run AM and PM cohorts in the same day, we would have AM cohort days and PM cohort days, so that we could really provide our custodians with an opportunity to go in there in a real setting and try to pilot this to be sure that it hangs together as carefully as we want it to. In terms of the steps that have gotten us here to tonight, we have thoroughly evaluated our transportation options to ensure that the plan that we're putting forth can be launched without an increased financial burden. If that couldn't happen, or if we find that that there are decisions that we've made that would change that decision, it would definitely have an impact on this plan. We have evaluated our cleaning and disinfecting plans between those shifts. Certainly there are, I think in coming into buildings for students and staff, we recognize that that comes with some parameters that could be more concerning than outdoor. And we want to ensure that we can address those spaces the way we should. I have had a fair number of conversations with parents, whether on the phone or through email, around notions of outdoor classrooms. And certainly that is something I have asked the principals to think about, how we can use the spaces around our schools. We're fortunate to have beautiful, available open spaces. We need to certainly, and I think this is the word that the administrators hear me say often, this is all a balance. And we know that we're looking at how to live stream from classrooms to students who may be at home. And that is definitely something that, you know, when we consider from an outdoor classroom perspective, those two things don't have an easy nexus. We have looked at our technology plan to ensure that we have adequate access for all students. We currently are working on launching one-to-one in grades 2 through 8. We have all of those plans set. Jeremy, who's the gentleman you heard me talking to before, is working through all of that, which is not to say that we are not planning for K-1 or what that would look like at the high school. We just are still engaged in those conversations. The survey that went out has, you know, we've spent a fair amount of time administratively going through those results and aggregating them, reviewing them repeatedly. This proposal has been reviewed by board committees. We started with community relations, facilities and operations looked at it, as did curriculum, knowing that over that period of about a week, a little more, the proposal was revised to reflect updated survey data. The district level restart committee met, and again, grateful to the 50 odd people who have volunteered to be part of that work. And those people have had opportunities to let us know what their subcommittee preferences are. And those committees have been formed and launched in the sense that they have been contacted, and that work will begin next week. Tonight's presentation is further step along that pathway. As I said, this will be posted tomorrow. I did not want to put it on the website before I had the opportunity to walk the board and the public through what we were looking at. In terms of next steps, we will certainly do our best to continue communicating with all. We will continue to dialogue and plan with those subcommittees and the administrative team, with our health professionals, local health officers, and the Department of Education, and with our local association leaders. We have been talking often, and it's very important to us to ensure that any staff concerns are considered and addressed to the greatest extent practical. We know that this is a new world we're all navigating, and it comes with some trepidation for sure. Jennifer Giordano and I have certainly been in touch. I don't know that our proposals completely dovetail, but we are certainly aware of the fact that we serve families that we have in common. And the administrative team is currently working on this required documentation. But again, that will only perhaps speak to the ways in which we are meeting these minimal standards, because quite frankly, we won't have everything figured out by August 3rd. I have people who have asked me about bathroom protocols, and I say, I don't know yet. There are decisions yet to be made, and there are many of them, and this is a tight timeline. If parents have concerns after tonight, I don't want anybody to think that we anticipate answering every question here this evening. I would encourage people to, if you're on a subcommittee, reach out to the leader of the subcommittee. If you have a friend who's working on that, reach out to them. If you're a member of a collective bargaining unit, I would reach out to my local leaders with my concerns, or to your administrators. And if you have no idea where to go, but you have things that are your concern and things that you want to share, we do still have that COVID hotline email address and extension, which was set up for this purpose. And people can leave messages in any language, and we will do our best to find answers and respond. Lastly, I do just want to remind everybody that we have a common goal. None of this is easy, and I don't want this to turn into a dialogue where we're pitting, one plan against another. What is better? What is worse? We did our best administratively to look at what the guidance we got from the Department of Education, the input that we got from the surveys, to develop a plan that we thought spoke to the desires of the community as they were shared. I completely recognize that everybody is looking for certainty, and there is little that we are navigating that is certain, and that is hard for everybody. We want the ground underneath our feet to stop moving, and it's not. So lastly, I will share that my approach is always, nothing is set in stone, and we are dedicated to making things the best that they can be. If you're concerned about, why things look the same at every building, this is where we are starting. And we in no way, shape, or form expect to say, okay, we've launched and this is it, and nothing's going to change. I think this is going to be an evolution, and we will do our best to ensure everybody is kept up to date and feels part of that conversation. Thank you. That's what I've got.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Dempsey. So I'm hearing from the union that their members can't get into the meeting. I want to tell the public that this plan is not something that we're voting on tonight, just so you know. This is purely a presentation. However, I in every way want people who want to be able to access this meeting to be able to do so. So I'm thinking that we can take questions on this presentation by people who are here tonight by email, and we can schedule another meeting on a different platform, and our tech people are going to have to be able to figure that out. And I don't know exactly what that's going to be, but it obviously can't be before we need 48 hours to schedule a meeting. It's very unfortunate, but I certainly want everybody to be able to see the meeting who wants to see the meeting. And who knew we had 240 other people who wanted to come tonight. So if we're going to do that, we would need to vote on doing that, and I would need a motion for that, or we can discuss. Any board members want to weigh in on this?
So how many people are waiting to get into the meeting?
I'm hearing like 25 people, but I don't know exactly.
I mean, yeah, we could certainly stop the meeting. We still have some business things to approve. Whether any
I
of
know.
them are time sensitive, I don't know. Jamie?
I don't know. Are any of these things that we're approving, would they hold for
I
till
would
next,
want
the
you
beginning of
to,
next week?
well, I would ask that the personnel items certainly be voted on tonight.
I'm thinking we should continue with this meeting and then perhaps discuss some alternate ideas.
Given that you're going to have another special meeting for the policy itself, we could certainly go through the presentation again. You're, as you said, Jamie, you're not voting on anything. You do have 248 people who are here now, and I know some of them are in the chat saying we need to continue, and I just wouldn't want the board to feel as though those people were left hanging either. It's obviously completely up to your group.
Yeah, some of the comments are saying that please continue with the meeting.
Derlise, can you lay out for us what happens if we continue? What's our worst case scenario if we continue with the meeting and experience some type of feedback from that outside of the meeting?
I mean, you did the best. You set up a meeting so that everybody, people would have access to it. This is allowed to have a virtual meeting like this. These are, I hate to use the same word that everybody uses all the time, but these are unprecedented times. So who knew that you were going to have more than 250 people available who wanted to participate, more than 250 people that wanted to participate in this, or that there was a limit to 250 on Google Meets. You've had meetings on Google Meets before, and this hasn't been an issue. So, I mean, you followed the law and done whatever you needed to do in order to be able to make this meeting accessible. The presentation has already been put up on the website because I even see the comments that say that it's on the website already. So if somebody wanted to send an email, it certainly can be, they certainly can take a look at it and send the email and have questions. You're not voting on anything that involves the reopening of school. It was really just a presentation. You can always schedule another meeting, and you can finish this meeting, and you can also bring up the presentation again. By that time, you may have, it might change a little bit because based on some of the questions and some of the feedback that you get, you might have additional information. So I think you're fine if you continue, and I think you're fine if you stop it and resume it another day. It's really up to you. And I'm seeing another chat, and it's saying people are dropping off. People are dropping out of the meeting, I guess, to let others come in.
I am less concerned about questions having to do with the presentation, in the sense that, as you said, you're not taking a vote. This is, quite frankly, people who may have detailed questions about how this is all going to be enacted may be disappointed when we say we don't have those answers yet. And certainly anybody can email me directly with their questions or send their questions to the COVID hotline for further follow-up. But I do know that that there are people here who seem that to want to participate in what they're putting down as calling the forum aspect of the meeting.
Well, one thought, I'm just thinking as you're speaking, if we continue the meeting, since we're not really voting on much except for personnel, people who are on the meeting right now will have an opportunity to ask questions, and those people that are not can look at the presentation and look at everything online and then send questions to you. And then in August, we'll see what happens then. But I really do think we should continue with this meeting and give people an opportunity that are here to ask what they want to ask. And also sometimes, one person may ask a question that somebody else may have the same question, or maybe multiple people do. So it could satisfy other people besides that one person.
Right, and I want to clarify that the board is not going to be voting on this plan at all, right, Gretchen? This is a plan you're going to put forward. It's going to be submitted and it will be approved. It's not something that we're ever voting
That is
on.
true. That is true.
So the public needs to understand that.
Well,
Okay,
with
well,
respect to the plan, the information is available to those who are on the call as well as online. And with respect to questions on that plan, people who are on the call can participate in the Q&A. People who are not on the call can submit questions via email. So I'm not sure that it doesn't make sense to just proceed with the meeting.
okay, Jenny, do you think we could put your email address up there on the next to the plan on the website so that people who are looking at it can send you things
Yes.
as soon as they have a question?
Email up there.
Yeah, Gretchen and Jamie, I think we've had people who have hung on with us for the past hour. And I think we owe them the opportunity to ask questions. So I actually think we should quickly move on and allow them to ask their questions and bring it to closure for the people on the line.
Got it. Just wanted to do the right thing. Okay. All right, Gretchen, you're through with that?
I am through. Yes. Thank you
Okay.
very much. And we'll go from here. Please just know this is one step along the journey. It is not, this is not the definitive, we're done with this work.
Okay. So now we move to public questions and comments for actionable agenda items. We very much welcome input from the public. Public comments are welcome at this time on any actionable agenda item. Towards the end of the meeting, there's a second public forum on any topic. Please state your name and address. Comments are limited to 3 minutes, but an individual may speak a second time after all others who wish to speak on the topic have been heard. Please understand that our public forums are not structured as question and answer sessions, but are offered as opportunities to share your thoughts with the board. In instances where the board feels that there is a misunderstanding or inaccuracy, the board president or superintendent may address the comment. In accordance with New Jersey statute, the board will not discuss matters regarding specific personnel. Public questions and comments will be limited to 30 minutes. Thank you for your input. And sometimes we do find that these public comment sessions turn into question and answer sessions. And we are trying to get better at this. So in an effort to streamline it, we would like to hear all the public comments for the time period and then make any responses at the end. Are there any public questions and comments on actionable agenda items? Jenny, how are you handling these chat questions?
Are we answering chat questions, or aren't people on the line so they can ask the questions in person?
Yes, and I would ask that people remember that the chat is not a sidebar conversation as well. I think it's important that not kind of devolve into something else.
So if you have a comment or question, speak up.
They could just raise their hand.
Well, I can't see everybody, so.
No, but
I think people have to unmute themselves if they want to ask a question.
I have a question. This is Christine Kelly at 18 Liberty Road. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm concerned not only for my the students, but I'm also concerned about the teachers. How do you plan on making the environment safe for the teachers? And are you going to be providing PPE for the teachers? And in addition to that, I'm very concerned about their emotional state and the impact of the amount of work that they are going to have to provide between in-class instruction and at home. What is the layout for the teachers? Thank you.
Thank you. Next comments? questions right now can be made on the presentation and any actionable agenda item that we'll be voting on.
Excuse me?
Comments or questions okay, go ahead.
Is there an all virtual option, please? Thank you.
Yes, the governor has given us the ability to provide that.
Can I ask a question? Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Susan Goulden. I'm 25 Golden Place in Bernardsville. Dr. Dempsey, I heard you mention sort of a rising responses to the surveys in the last few days. I'm curious if now that the all virtual option has been announced, if you want to resurvey the parents to get a sense of how many families might choose to go 100% virtual, because then that would obviously impact what you might be able to do in terms of your length of in-person instruction while maintaining social distancing.
We do plan on engaging in some of that survey work. I think we're trying to work out the timing of that, Susan, based on our restart subcommittees, because I want to be sure that we are as efficient in our data gathering as we can be. But yes, the initial survey was more to get people's thoughts and feelings, but certainly we did not have anything in there that would lock anybody into any decision.
Next.
Hi, I'm
Hi,
Noble.
this is Janine Silverberg.
Hello.
Hi, this is Janine Silverberg. My question is, if you commit to in-person instruction as a family, do you have the opportunity to pivot to virtual at any point, or are you making that commitment for the long term? Thank you.
Okay. And I'm not sure we're going to address all of these things right at this moment. We are taking these questions and comments. I'm not sure, as Dr. Dempsey said, there are answers to every question at this point. Noble, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I'm at 60 Highview Avenue. I just wanted to express general support. The school was actually pretty close to the beginning of our virtual education. They started school at 8:45 instead of 7:45. And I, as well as a lot of students I know, were a big fan of that change. We really appreciated an additional hour of sleep, especially during all the crazy stuff that's going on. And I saw on the sample slide that you plan on starting at 7:45. And I think that while we're thinking about huge changes in the schedule next year, that maybe a later start time could also be on the table. Thank you.
Thank you. I get it. Anyone have another one?
This is Laura Shabazz at 150 Mount Airy. I have a question about sort of unforeseen issues that might come up. You know, little kids losing teeth. Are you calling in janitors at that moment to scrub down the whole classroom? You know, one kid chases another down the hallway pretending to cough on them because these are kids, right? You know, my daughter's at Bedwell and little kids can be gross. So I'm just wondering kind of what's going to be in place in the moment to address that, and what kinds of consequences or talks are going to be given to young kids to make sure they understand how serious the situation is. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. That's a good one. Any additional questions?
Hi, I have a question. This is Kristen Seeker. I'm at 101 Peapack Road. This isn't a question about the road back. This is a question about where we are in terms of the contracts for the paraprofessionals.
I believe you can see they're on the agenda for tonight.
So they will be, after tonight, they'll be, I guess, voted in to have a contract for this academic year?
As soon as we continue the meeting, it's coming up.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yep. Anyone else?
Hi.
No.
Oh, thank you. I'm Aileen Peterson, 3 Blue Heron Lane in Gladstone. I was just wondering about the teacher input in all of this. Have they been surveyed, and like what was their response rate overall? How do they feel about going back, and what's their input? Will we find out, how they feel about it, and then can we support them in any way?
We are continuing to talk to their leadership often. This week, we have another conversation coming up on Friday. I appreciate, Ms. Peterson, your concern for them. Certainly, I think we share that, and we want to make sure that everybody feels as comfortable as we can help them to feel.
And I believe teachers and their leadership are also on the restart committees, correct?
Sorry, yes, I couldn't unmute. Yes, we worked with SHE leaders, and they ensured that they have representation across those subcommittees.
Next.
John Buckley, 20 Woodland Road. Do you know when football practices with coaches present will be able to begin?
I can't answer that question exactly right now. If you stay for the rest of the meeting, you may learn some other information about that.
Okay.
Hi, Lynn Weltler, President of the Somerset Hills Education Association. Mrs. Peterson, I would like to answer your question. SHE took their own survey to see how teachers felt about returning. And to be very honest, approximately 70% felt uncomfortable. They were concerned, well, let me put it this way, 45% said that they were very or extremely concerned about returning, and an additional 20 some odd percent were just sort of neutral, not quite sure how they were feeling about it. But there was a great percentage of staff that, it wasn't just teachers, staff that felt that their safety could be compromised.
Ms. Weltler?
Hi, Darylise.
Hello, how are you? Good to see
fine,
you.
how are you?
I'm well, thank you. So I appreciate your trying to answer the question for the member of the public whose name I forgot already, and I apologize for that, but we're not doing this as an open forum. This is just a regular public board meeting, and so the questions are for the board, and so if there's, and then the board will respond to those, okay? So otherwise,
Okay,
it's too difficult with too many people if we're gonna be having responses back and forth, okay?
Okay, that is fine, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Craig Amico at 20 Ann Street. Just curious if there's a policy or thought put out to set up the AM and PM sessions. What's the equitable and fair treatment if we go that route? How students will be selected in each? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Next question.
Hi, Jack Hicks, 2 Highview Avenue. I'm just wondering about the feasibility, or how feasible would it be to clean an entire building in 2.5 hours between the AM and PM sessions with the current custodial staff? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Jack. Next.
Hi, this is Robin Dwyer from 48 Pill Hill. I have a question as to when we will find out any information on the special education department, specifically also cleaning in regards to such, because unlike the regular classrooms, some of these kids are in therapies, and between every therapy session, these rooms would need to be cleaned. So I'm just interested in when that information will roll out. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Next question. Are there any further questions at this time?
Yes, hi, this is Gina McCready up at 20 Page Hill Road in Bernardsville. One, I'd like to say that I agree with Noble on the later start times, but I am concerned that the cleaning time is the same amount of the instruction time. So I would imagine that that would extend make longer days. So obviously that has to be taken into account. But my question really is around the 5 days, and is it going to be, are the days that the kids will be in school for instructional work 5 days a week, or will it be like a Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, or a Monday, Wednesday, and a Tuesday, Thursday? So will it be part-time every week or every other week? I didn't know what you guys were thinking at this time. In addition, would the teachers and the students be on the same timing?
Gina, the plan would be to grow to that 5 days a week. I don't know that we feel like we can launch from that week one. And teacher schedules certainly are governed by their collective bargaining agreement. So we have no intention of violating any term of that.
Yeah, okay, understood. So that was actually going to be my last question about, with unions and teachers and for the public schools. I know a lot of parents, including myself, are debating on private schooling for our children, whether it be one or more of them. And just wondering about the thoughts on going back from a union perspective, if in fact there is 70% of teachers or a majority of teachers that don't feel comfortable going back, as Ms. Welter just stated. Is that going to be a requirement, or obviously that has to have an impact on your plan and potentially what the governor plans to do? So I'm just wondering how much of an impact that might have on your plan. Realizing that question probably can't be answered right now. Thanks, that's all.
Thank you for that question. Are there any further questions right now?
Hi, my name's Anna Gunning. I was wondering if there is a return to fully virtual instruction, or because there is going to be a fully virtual instruction, is there going to be any plan for like oversight of teachers' plans for fully virtual, so that there's some consistency in how teachers are executing their plans?
I can't speak to the specifics. I know there was a lot of work done over the summer on virtual learning, but I can't speak to the specifics on that now. So
our curriculum supervisors are certainly working, as are our teachers. We have a professional development institute that runs during the summer, and I know we have lots of teachers who are engaged in exploring how best to deliver instruction virtually. Quite frankly, I wish that perhaps we weren't pulled in a million directions. And I think that's what we're all trying to navigate, is how do we do all of this as well as we possibly can simultaneously on a tight timeline.
Hi, Paula Gray, teacher at the high school. I have a question concerning the technology for the students. I assume that more than likely we won't be using Chromebook carts because of the cleaning of them would be almost impossible between usage. But are we looking at as a district to start to provide the technology to all of our students so that that becomes a one-on-one with all of our students? And if we do go to remote learning, they will not automatically have those with them. Thank you. Thank you for everything you're doing. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. I believe everything is on the table. As I've heard our superintendent say many times, everything is on the table. We have about 5 minutes left in this first 30-minute session of public comments and questions. Are there any further questions at this time? There will be another section at the end of the meeting for all other questions and comments on anything.
Hi, my name is Eddie Berman, 39 Crystal Road. And I was wondering about, you said how
Edward, I can't really hear. Okay, that's better.
Sorry, I was covering the mic. My name is Eddie Berman from 39 Post Kennel Road, Bartles, New Jersey. And you said how you're gonna try and group students for their schedules so they're kind of in the same. And I was wondering how this would kind of happen for seniors, considering many of us are taking more specific classes because all our requirements are knocked out of the way.
We're figuring it out, Eddie. We don't have that information for you tonight.
Anybody else right now?
Sorry, this is Gina McCready. I had one more. Are the siblings being considered to be on the same schedules?
Yes, thank you for that, Gina. I meant to mention that, yes, we are absolutely committed to ensuring that families have their students on the same schedules.
Perfect, thank you.
Hi, this is Mindy Shaltry, 29 Old Army. I'm just wondering if there's any information about when we will get more information about what our schedule might look like.
That is the work that is ongoing. I certainly wish I could tell you a definitive, this is when it will happen, but I do not have that information for you yet.
And I'm sure you're considering this, but just for the families that are going to have to arrange additional support for their kids, it's just important to figure out the timing so we can make a plan.
Absolutely, absolutely. And our assistant superintendent has reached out to the YMCA to see how perhaps we can facilitate some options for families. But we understand that the devil is in the details, and everybody sort of wants to know how this impacts their own family sooner rather than later.
I figured that you might not have an answer to this one, but I wasn't sure if you would be able to give any information as to how the performing arts classes, that is band, choir, and its variations, would work under this. All right, I figured I would ask.
If only.
Right.
Hi, Kimberly
Okay.
Laverty. I have one question. Sorry. Kimberly Laverty, Annabelle Place. I just wanted to ask, because obviously it was a fire drill come March, April, May, June. If we do go virtual, do we have the commitment from the teachers and the board that it will be much improved? Live teaching more than recordings?
I think there are conversations that are in progress that would we would hope that is the case, and certainly that is something that has come out through the survey. But I cannot tell you at this moment definitively what that would look like, you know, real time across the buildings.
Hello? Anyone further at this point? I think we're going to be wrapping up this first. I could take one last question.
Hi, yes, this is Ronnie Armelino Goodwin at 5 Bodine Avenue in Gladstone. I guess I have a few questions that kind of all relate to the same thing. One being that has there been concern, or I guess I have concern, that the 2-hour days might sacrifice quality of their education just for quantity of time in the school? So would it be better to have 2 full days where they can have a consistent full day of face-to-face instruction, and then we can balance it at home with 2 to 3 days of virtual learning? And then that being said, is the decision that's going to be put into place in the fall, could that change? Like if it's going to be these half hybrid days, could it change at some point and go to full days at any point as the the public health situation changes?
It could absolutely change at any moment.
It could change at any moment. Okay, thank you.
Okay, at this time, I think our 30 minutes are up for the first public question and comment section. You will all have a chance at the end to ask any further questions or give comments on this or any other part of the meeting at that point. So we can leave that for later. for now, I think I need a motion to approve the minutes from our June 10th
Before
meeting.
we approve the minutes, Jamie, there is one correction under supplementary matters. Last week about the Environmental Commission placing a plaque and plantings. They're actually going to be placed right where the road splits from Olcott to Childsworth, right across from the football field. They're not going to be placed in the center of town. So that just needs to be corrected.
Okay.
Okay, we will correct that before we post the minutes.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes with that correction made?
I make a motion.
Okay.
A second.
Janice, okay, that was you, Nicole?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Bob, well, first for the public, not every committee met this month. It was sort of an unusual month. And
We have to vote. You got to vote.
Roll call for the minutes.
oh yeah, we got to vote, right?
Okay. Mr. Baker?
Yes.
Ms. Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Frenda?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Ms. Havens?
Yes.
Mrs. Santoro?
Yes.
Mrs. Tober?
Yes.
Ms. Virtue?
Yes.
Mrs. Rye?
Yes.
And Mrs. Lees? Mrs. Lee?
Jamie, I'm muted.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, motion carried.
I was just going to explain to the public that not every committee met this month. It was sort of an unusual month. So this will be somewhat abbreviated. But Bob, you want to start with finance?
Okay, I will start with the finance committee. We did not meet this month. There are 3 items on the agenda which we will vote on after I talk about stipends for co-curricular and athletics. That was brought up before by several people. I first want to say that the board wants to appoint and have as many stipends that we normally do for our co-curricular and our athletics done for this coming school year, as much as the administration says that we can do and what the governor says that we can do. So we want to do as much for all the students as possible, but as you know, some of them will not be possible or will be very difficult in the environment we're going into, but we will work on those. So as a little background for the board, last year we spent $1,300,000 for stipends for all activities for all 3 schools. High school sports was at least $500,000 for all the coaches. So the board last spring, we were very concerned about when we became a virtual school back in March, that we were required to pay all the stipends for sports that were stopped 1 or 2 weeks after they got started. The governor passed a law, not the governor, the Assembly and the Senate passed a law, the governor signed it, saying that any appointed people had to be paid 100%. And we're going to honor that. And we have honored it for all the stipends for last year. However, many school districts throughout the state of New Jersey have concerns about that. So they've done sidebar agreements with their union organizations. And we looked at several, and we sat down with Shea, our association here at Somerset Hills, and we tried to come to a sidebar agreement. Basically, the agreement is we're going to, that we would sign all the coaches starting now for the fall sports, and that they would get paid as we go. So if the governor stops something on the 3rd week in September, they would get paid up to about that point. We modeled this after Bernards Township, who agreed on this, and that's how Bernards Township is operating right now. we thought it was a very fair and a good way to attack this problem. You know, we don't mind paying for something where everybody's getting value. And it was hard. The contract doesn't recognize virtual co-curricular activities. It never has, but we felt that this was a way to attack the problem. All right. So we met with them and we were not able to come to an agreement. They would not come to an agreement on what we proposed. So what are we going to do now? So we're going to sit down these next few weeks and decide which coaches need to be appointed by the middle of August, and then other co-curriculars that we feel comfortable as we go very slowly down this path towards school reopening, what stipends we can appoint. And you can imagine certain stipends like the madrigals, all these young people are singing together close. Well, would we want to appoint that? I don't know. The administration has to sit down and talk about that. So that's one stipend. We have a yearbook. Could we do that if we went to virtual in the middle of the year? Probably we could. But we don't have a plan, so we haven't. We're not at the point where we can do this yet. So we are going to work on that in these next few weeks, and we will appoint coaches so we can start our students, you know, what they call condition exercising in these next few weeks before the end of August. So we are willing to talk to Shea if they want to again, but at the moment we were going forward on appointing these stipends for high school athletics. So with that, I'd like to move action items 1 through 3. Do I have a second?
I second. Janice.
Okay. Any discussion on these action items? Seeing none, let's do a roll call. Okay, Jenny?
Okay, Mr. Baker,
Yes.
Ms. Cooper,
Yes.
Mrs. Brenda,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Ms. Nathans,
Yes.
Mrs. Santoro,
Yes.
Mrs. Tober,
Yes.
Ms. Virtue,
Yes.
Mrs. Rye,
Yes.
Mrs. Lees,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay. Bob, do you want to continue with facilities?
Right. The Facilities and Operation Committee met last July 14th for an hour and a half. Everybody was present. The first thing we discussed with Doug Lucas, who's Director of Facilities, he gave us an overview of all the equipment he's been able to purchase for the last 3 or 4 months to make our building safe and provide social distancing where needed. So he talked about masks that he's acquired, face shields, all the plexiglass, hand sanitizers, the auto hand sanitizers, ultraviolet air scrubbers for various rooms, sanitizing pump dispensers, signs. And he also talked about an interesting topic, touchless sinks. The touchless sinks is the faucets and the toilets. We're in pretty good shape across the district, but we're not 100%. We're above 50% based on what we did to our buildings years ago. But if we wanted to do 100%, getting touchless, faceless, touchless faucets and toilets, the parts are very hard to get, and they're going to hospitals and other organizations who are a higher priority. So we will try to make some conversions where we can afford to do it, and we can find the equipment. The second item we talked about was transportation, and I'm not going to go into a lot of details because the superintendent talked about transportation before in our reopening. But if you look at the number of buses we have and the number of children who ride the buses, that was one of the reasons we felt that this this morning, afternoon structure would probably work. And then third, the superintendent, Dr. Dempsey, talked about the results of the parent survey, what we had last week, which now has changed slightly. And then the committee had a wide discussion on all the options for reopening. And the consensus of the committee then was that the AM, PM cohorts every day of the week was a great idea. And I think from a facility standpoint, one thing that wasn't mentioned before, but we won't have to worry about lunch for every child. We will for some, we will for the staff, but trying to feed 1,900 people every day was going to be a real challenge with the social distancing. So that's sort of off the table. So that's sort of a good thing with this arrangement. And so that was what we talked about. So I have no action items, so I will give ground to the curriculum chairperson.
Bob,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Bob, can I just ask a question about facilities, about
Sure.
the meeting? I was just wondering, in that meeting, did you talk at all about the logistics of taking temperatures or any equipment that might be needed?
Well, we talked about, he's acquired some thermometers, they're hard to get. And whether they would be, is it really needed for every student every day? I've talked to a lot of doctors who say, you got to realize that this is only for people who might have a fever. If you're carrying the virus and you're asymptomatic, you don't have it. So we have to decide how much are we going to do. So we had to talk about it. We didn't decide anything. There's various opinions on the necessity of it, or whether it's just not getting at it what you think it's going to be. Okay, but wearing masks is always the number one item, and I don't think anybody's arguing with that. Okay.
Kathy, I would anticipate that our health and safety subcommittee, which has all of the district nurses on it, Dr. Agathis will be linked in, as will our local health officer, Lucy Forgione. And I certainly think that is something that they will continue to discuss. You know, we want to be sure that everybody feels and knows that we are taking every precaution we can, but that is definitely something that is debated in terms of the benefit. Is it a real benefit or is it a perceived benefit? So I think we just need to see where people, kind of where the experts lead us in that.
You know, I find that interesting, Gretchen, because I know in the preschool aged arena, it's actually required. And I find it ironic because some data that I've read recently says that younger age children aren't transmitters as much as children over the age 10. So I find it odd that the state's requiring it for preschoolers and not necessarily for our older age children. But as you said, we'll hear from our experts. Thank you.
And Gretchen, there's certainly the notion that of checking people in every day through a procedure, right? So how that actually looks.
We have to balance, the guidance from the state on this is incredibly minimal, and we recognize that. We also know that there is perhaps a perceived benefit to that. So does it give people comfort, even if scientifically people might say, well, is there benefit, isn't there benefit? So again, I don't know that we're trying to position ourselves to say, let's hear what the experts say. We've got this subcommittee that's dedicated to looking at health and safety. We are exploring what we could purchase if we decided to purchase something, so that we knew we wouldn't get too jammed up from a procedural operational standpoint. So it's certainly something that is front and center in that work, but I don't know that we have a decision yet.
And I just want to throw out there too, I think we talked about, for kids getting on a bus, do you do it before they get on the bus, or they get off the bus, their temperatures might be elevated, and especially at the beginning of school anyway. So, I know there's lots to be answered on that, but that was another point of the conversation. I think this all just points to every decision that the district is making has so many nuances to it, but will have to be ironed out, right, over the next few weeks. So.
And I just want to add to the conversation that we go so many places where temperatures are checked, and, you know, these are our children. My feeling is I'm glad you're looking into it. And as far as the device goes, there are devices that you can stand in front of and the temperature would be taking immediately. It wouldn't take
Those
that.
are what we're looking at, Janice. So thank you. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions on facilities or operations from the board? There's nothing to move there. So if not, we can move to curriculum.
Okay, everyone was present at our July 20th curriculum committee meeting. And we just reviewed the district's opening plan as well as the survey results, which Dr. Dempsey has presented this evening. I did want to mention about professional development. We did talk somewhat about professional development being centered around virtual teaching and, you know, learning both the technical parts and improvement or learning on how we could improve and do better at virtual teaching. So there were no actionable items, so that's it.
Okay, we can move to, if there's any conversation around that. Anybody have any comments about that? Okay. If not, we'll move to personnel and policy. Heather?
Okay, hi. I don't have a committee report. We did not meet as a committee, but we do have agenda items to move. So I would like to move agenda items number 1 through 16.
I'll second that. It's Kathy.
Thanks, Kathy. Any discussions?
Ready for roll?
Yep.
Okay. Mr. Baker?
Yes.
Yes. Mrs. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Ms. Nathan?
Yes.
Mrs. Santoro?
Yes.
Mrs. Tober?
Yes.
Ms. Virtue?
Yes.
Mrs. Rye?
Yes.
And Mrs. Lees?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Policy did not meet. So we can move on to community relations. Kathy?
Thanks, Jamie. The Community Relations Committee met on Monday, July 13th for about an hour and a half, and all our committee members were in attendance. During the meeting, Dr. Dempsey shared with the committee the parameters document from the NJDOE regarding the road back. She also reviewed with the committee the preliminary survey results from the school community survey, as well as information surrounding the Restart Committee and its related subcommittees. At this time, there are no items to move forward.
Is there any conversation around that? Comments from the board? No? Okay. Seeing none, we can move now to supplementary matters on the board. Is there anything people want to talk about that we haven't talked about yet?
It's not an item. I just do want to thank Gretchen and the administration. This has been a very trying time. It's a fluid time. Things are changing. And even though we ask a million questions, we really do appreciate what you've done day in and day out.
Thank you, Janice. I will pass that along to everybody on the team.
Well said, Janice.
Yeah. We know it's tough. Shooting for a moving target constantly with little direction is not an easy thing. And you guys have really been working tirelessly. And yes, I know when people say they wouldn't want your job, I get it. Okay, so now we can move to public questions and comments on any item or non-agenda item. Again, I'm going to take all the comments, and if there are any responses, we will make them at the end. Do we have any?
Yes, this is Mark Noonan, staff member. I have a question. I'd like to know, what are staff members supposed to do with their children if schools are on a split schedule and a staff member has to continue instruction during the afternoon?
Okay, thank you for the question. Any further questions?
This is Susan Goulden, 25 Oak Place in Bernardsville. Just am looking for a little bit more clarity from Mr. Baker. I just listened to your presentation on the appointment.
Susan, you have a really rough connection there. There's a lot of static. I don't know if there's anything you can do. It's hard to hear you.
I apologize. Is that any better?
Very marginally.
Very marginally. I'm sorry, technology, not my strong suit. So I'll try to shout.
Okay, sorry.
See if that helps. I apologize. I was just looking for more clarity on this issue of fall sports coaches. Wasn't clear from Mr. Baker's comments. What I seemed to hear him say was that we will be moving forward in the next few weeks, which I would just like to say I find that alarming if that is truly the case, that this is something that is weeks away from happening. You know, the children are literally on the sidelines right now, and every other town, athletes are working out. So I'm imploring you all to come to a resolution to get these children on the fields, please.
Thank you. Susan? Any other questions right now?
Yes, this is Christy Kelly, 18 Liberty Road. I'm just curious, the survey that's gone out to first of all, has there been a survey sent out to teachers? And will that survey be posted for parents to review? That's my question. Thank you.
Yes, hi, sorry, this is Gina McCready again from 20 Page Hill Road. I was going to ask a similar question, is what was in the staff survey that was sent? And will it be posted for public review? Will we receive their results from the SHSD survey? And then in addition, because Mrs. Welter noted there was a SHE survey as well, will that survey and the results also be available for the public?
That's a good question. Thank you.
I had a question for Mr. Baker. It's actually a point of clarification. This is Lou Romano. I don't know if Mr. Baker is listening now.
Yes, he's listening.
He is. Mr. Baker, so it is around sports. Actually, I'm interested in all activities as a whole. I know you're working through that. I was left with the impression after you gave your full disclosure that some time ago, it could be weeks ago, the board actually approved the stipends in some form or fashion for, at the very least, fall activities or maybe fall sports specific. My only point on this is that the customers are the kids. I know you're working hard on the board, and I know the teachers union's working hard as well. It's about the kids. It's about the parents. We are the customers. They are taking it on the chin. It's gone on long enough. I'm not blaming you, But if you're telling me, if I'm left with the impression here that there was some negotiations going on some time ago, and then we decided to punt weeks later, and maybe that's not a good term, I personally find it unacceptable as a customer. Listen, I know a lot of these parents, it's a lot of kids that are suffering. It's not just because they can't be in an activity, it's the socialization, it's all that. It's everything that you're trying to do also with going back to school. But I have to tell you, listen, I'm the customer here, and so are the kids. Please tell me, was this something that the board offered, or you guys were negotiating with the teachers union weeks ago, and then there's been this void of time that went by? It's really, I think it's unacceptable. And if you can comment on it, because maybe I'm mistaken, I only hear loose talk, and I was very surprised when you came out with a full disclosure today, which was actually pleasant to hear. But if you can elaborate a little more, that would be great.
We may do that at the end after we hear any more questions, Mr. Romano.
That's fine. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello. Yes.
Hi, this is Melanie Smith. I live at 11 Patriot Road in Gladstone. I'm a parent of a graduating senior, also will have a senior this year. My comment was, I'm also a teacher in a neighboring district, so I have a great appreciation for everything you are doing as a board, the administration. It is thankless, and I appreciate that. I wanted to note that in the springtime, I really appreciated the communication that we were getting from Mrs. Dempsey, from the principal of the high school. I, as a teacher, was not getting the same thing from my district, so I just wanted to thank you for that. The other thing I did want to mention, because I am a teacher in a neighboring district, I have done a lot of research on the taking of temperatures and whatnot. I implore you, please consider that. I know as a parent that would be the deciding factor for whether or not I send my child to school. So I know you're waiting to hear from the experts, but in terms of safeguarding the teachers and the students, I really would encourage you. I know it's procedurally a pain. It's going to take time, but I think if you can't really say that you're taking every precaution if you don't take the temperatures. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Melanie. Anybody else?
Hi, this is Mindy Sheltery, 29 Old Army. I understand that parents will have the choice, right, for if maybe they have a risk factor for COVID, that they could keep their kids home from school and choose a virtual option. I'm asking about maybe staff members who might have risk factors for COVID. Are you giving consideration to those people so that we can protect those staff members as well from potentially being exposed to the virus?
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, everyone. It's Sean Laverty, 60 Ambar Place in Bernardsville. Thanks for holding the meeting. I just want to address Bob Baker and the entire board. What's concerning, and I'll piggyback on what Lou Romano said and Susan Goulden, is that there's a lack of urgency, regarding sports and getting the kids back on the field and all the activities that can get started. And that's alarming and disappointing because it's very important. We're at a disadvantage right now, as has been stated, versus other districts in the area. And I just really, whatever it takes, get the, Shay, I know it's two to tango here. Get Shay to the table. You guys have to make a deal. And I just, again, the lack of urgency is very disappointing. And I just hope that you guys take the opportunity, take the lead, and get a deal done, because it is about the kids. And the perception here that you guys are leaving is that it's a money thing. And I don't believe it is, but I think that's what some people are going to walk away with. It's about the kids and doing what's right. So lead, bring Shay to the table, and make a deal. Thanks.
Thank you.
Sorry, this
Any
is
questions?
this is Gina McCready again. Sorry, I have to address the woman who commented about taking temperatures. I mean, I understand that it is a precautionary measure and it might be a risk mitigation measure, but it's also it's a false sense of security, and there is no way to know whether or not somebody is carrying COVID, whether or not they have a temperature. We've been taking temperatures at rec camp for the past couple of weeks now since they've been open for the summer. And some kids have falsely had very high temperatures, gone immediately to the doctor, and the doctor's like, it's just too hot. You're sitting in the car and you're waiting for your temperature to be taken, and it's just too hot. And by the time they've gotten to the doctor, their temperature has come way down. So it is an absolute false sense of security to take time and materials really away from the staff and the students in order to take that extra measure. I'll just go on record for saying that. Thank you.
Hi.
Thank you.
It's Paula Gray again from the high school. I have a question that I think Gretchen will understand. The teaching of mathematics is not a spoken language, it's a written language. So when we were in the spring delegated to teaching remotely, it's very challenging in mathematics because I can't just be on a screen talking math to you. I need to write it and to show it. So I was handwriting all my class notes every single day so they could see what I was writing and doing step by step. I have spoken to our supervisor and so has the whole math department that we need some kind of support as math teachers, that we could either have a document camera if we go back to any kind of remote teaching, which we know is going to happen, or a tablet which attaches as an auxiliary device to our computer, where we could write on the device the mathematical equations and notations and have students see what we're doing. I would imagine this would also coincide with physics and chemistry, which are also very much written languages as opposed to spoken languages. So if I started speaking a math equation right now to you, I'd get to a point that no one would have any idea what I'm talking about, because they need to see symbols, they need to see the language. So I'm hoping maybe we could address that for middle school math teachers, high school math teachers. It's not just me, but I think it's something we have to think about if we do go remote, because I would have loved to have done more live teaching with my classes, and a lot of my kids are on here tonight, but it's very difficult to do live with math unless I can show the math. Does that make sense, Gretchen? Yeah.
It does. I was trying to unmute myself. Yes, thank you, Paula.
All you have to do is hold the space bar and put it down.
There you go.
Just touch the space bar, hold it down, and you're unmuted. It's easier.
Okay. I got it.
I learned that in the class this week. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments?
Hi, Heather Hunkley, journalism teacher, newspaper advisor, and yearbook advisor. And I just wanted to make a comment regarding Mr. Baker's comments regarding co-curricular activities. And I, for one, saw firsthand the time and effort that both the yearbook and journalism students put in during virtual learning. The newspaper did not stop publishing articles. We published over 100 articles virtually while we were online, virtually, through our class and through the extracurricular things that we did. We also published a senior issue that was mailed directly to the members of the senior class to their homes so that they could still have that piece, that artifact that they look forward to so much during the year. So we sent that, and it was mailed directly from our publisher right to their homes. And that was done through all of my students working virtually on that issue and us using Google Drive and uploading things. And we also finished the yearbook. We left school with 38 blank pages in the yearbook when we went to virtual learning, and we were able to publish the yearbook from home and get it sent to the printer actually 2 weeks before our final deadline, which was amazing, something that we've never been able to accomplish even while we were in school. So we are really able to do a lot of the co-curricular activities that you were mentioning from home. And I hope that you reach out to the teachers and the advisors of those programs to ask what capabilities we have to conduct those clubs and activities online or remotely before making decisions about what you would like to renew contractually. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Jim McCarron. Oh,
There you go.
hello. Jim McCarron, Vice President of the Association and Head Negotiator. My comments will be directed to Mr. Baker. Mr. Baker, as you know, we have not negotiated in public, but since you said several things, I'd like to address and make comments to you directly. One, it is in the board's power right now. The board has the power to issue every sports and every other stipend that is out there. You have that power to do that right now. You could issue those right now. The association is willing, was willing, and is willing to meet with you because we understand the need. We understand the times we are, even though the contract is not open right now, we were and are still remained willing to open the contract to negotiate with you. The difference is that we've asked you multiple times, please give us a list of everything you would like to run. We asked that from your negotiations team. We asked that from Mr. Baker. Give us a list of what you'd like to run. Besides just sports, is there not going to be a National Honor Society? If we are going to do this, the association felt, let's do this right. Give us a list of everything that you plan to run. We sat down in the association, made a list of things that could run live, that we felt could run live, things that could run virtual, things that we needed to discuss with you, and things that we understand by looking at those stipends cannot happen at all. That list, we put together our own copy of that list. We're asking you, we're still willing to work with you. We're still willing to get the job done, but we need a list of every stipend and everything you're planning on running. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I'd like to, Jack Hicks, to Highview Avenue. I'd like to introduce a point of clarification. There was a comment made earlier regarding stipends, and there was a reference to madrigals, and I'd like to clarify that madrigals, jazz band, orchestra, and concert band are all actually classes put in the day. They're not extracurriculars that have a stipend, and they're taught by teachers who are paid on the salary. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. I think he was just giving examples of different types of things. I don't think it was specific to that. Anyone else?
The power's nearest.
This is Christine Kelly again. I'm sorry, I've got lots of questions. My question has to do with busing. I'm one of those parents that pays for busing. I know as of now, where I work as a teacher, I'll be at school all day, every day, 5 days a week. It is essential that I have busing for my kids to get to and from school. Can you just clarify, is that something that's on the chopping block, taking that away, or what was the transportation situation for the fall? Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other topics that people want to comment on?
This is Lou Romano again. Listen, so we heard Mr. McCarron. This is about the activities front and Mr. Baker. There seems to be a lot of commonality there and stuff like that. I really don't think we should wait till August. I know everyone's exhausted, but it looks like the will's there. People are kind of talking past each other, but between the two parties there, again, remember who the customer is. Remember, you need help, just run to the parents. We're always here. We always have been. It's a lot of work. But it looks like there's enough common threads that we shouldn't have to wait a while. And part of it is these kids actually look at some of these team leaders and coaches as role models and stuff. I think the sooner the better. I know it's hard, but if there's a way to make it happen, make it happen. That's my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other topics we have not gotten to yet? Okay. If there are no other additional comments, Gretchen, was there anything you wanted to respond to? specifically. I know there was,
Yeah, there
I
were
think
just
in
a
terms
couple
of
of
staff
things.
surveys and
Yes.
things that are getting posted, I'm not sure personnel things like that could be posted.
And that's what I was going to say. Certainly the results of the survey that I have conducted in terms of teachers would not be something that would be subject to public posting. I appreciate what Paula shared about how best to support teachers through that virtual instruction, and we'll see what we can put together there. I can't speak, unfortunately, financially, that is part of the picture, and so I can't say to you, sure, you'll have it tomorrow, but I understand the need and where you're coming from, and I think there are disciplines that are impacted in ways that others may not be. In terms of busing, I understand the concern around subscription busing. Certainly, we don't have any final decision. I understand why people would be concerned that it would be no longer available. Is that a real fear? It is, but that is not to say that it has been eliminated at this point in time. It is something that we are still working through, but I would encourage anybody who's relying on it to think about alternatives on their end, just to not be caught between a rock and a hard place. That's kind of what I've got, Jane.
Okay, thank you. Bob, I don't know if you want to make some clarification on what's happening here.
Yes, I will do that. Going back to the way we normally do stipends, we normally would have appointed stipends back in May and June for the coming fall season and for the entire year. But because we were in the situation we were, we needed to wait to see what the governor was going to allow. So we didn't appoint any stipends. We didn't do anything. And then as soon as school ended, we started sitting down talking to Shay to see if we come up with a sidebar. So we worked on those. We stopped talking about 8 or 9 days ago. It's my memory. Right now, you heard what's difficult for the board. We cannot say every stipend we want to run, because as we approach August, it's going to be clearer. There might be like, we're going to have, it's the yearbook. Okay, I think we all agree we can have the yearbook. All right, and the newspaper. But we need the administration to sit down and say, which ones are we sure we can do the entire year, whether we're in school or we're virtual? So giving Shay an entire list is impossible. And that's what caused this not to work. All right. We want to get, so we will go ahead and appoint the coaches. We're going to sit down and figure out how many coaches we need for each sport in the fall, because we have to follow certain rules. But the NJSIAA says, so we're going to make sure that we appoint those people. So we're going to do that. Everybody who was concerned about it's going to happen. And you might seem like we're going slow, but we're going as fast as we can do this. Okay. And we will meet with Shay either tomorrow or early next week if they want to. I'm willing to do that, but we cannot give them a full list of every stipend we're going to do, because we might get to August and we're going to add 5 more, or because we're unsure now. So that's the sticking point. We can't say with certainty what we can run at the moment. Things are changing weekly. So so in the sidebar, we talked about virtual co-curriculars, and in there we wanted to say, if school gets shut down and we go virtual, and let's say you're a teacher with a stipend, we would need to know the plan so we know that, yes, we have a benefit of going forward with a virtual and that stipend. Some stipends just don't work virtually and some do. So, we cannot give Shay an 100% list. If that's what they want, then meeting is a waste of time. But if they're willing to bend on that, we will meet. All right.
And of course, I'm just going to add here that yes, we can appoint anybody we want, any day we want, after we agree to do it in committee. And I mean, I'm a parent of a fall athlete, and they normally don't start practicing officially until after the middle of August. They have captain's practices and whatnot beforehand, which I know are going on. So the fact that the governor said that these conditioning practices could happen with very specific parameters starting July 13th was why we proactively reached out ahead of that time so that we could allow our kids to take advantage of that opportunity without stepping into the whole thing about $1.3 million of stipends for the entire year. That was not our goal at that time. We're trying to do things as states and other schools and other organizations are in an incremental way, because this is the way this is. You can't just, things are not like they used to be. So everything is incremental. And as the information comes out, the administration is reacting to it and planning with that in mind. So I know people seem to be very impatient for this to happen today, and it will happen, and they will have ample time. They've already pushed seasons back, as we know, for competition. It will happen, and you have to believe that we all want our kids to have all these opportunities. And that includes all activities, all stipends. We all want that. There's nobody on this board that doesn't want that to happen. So that's all I can say.
Jamie, I know, excuse me one moment, Lynn. Jamie, if I know it's not traditional, but given the circumstances, would it be all right if I speak? You muted.
You have a lot of static, Sam.
Someone else, I think, is.
I think maybe Bob has to mute. That might help.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, I know it's not traditional, but the board president is typically addressing, and there were comments directed at Mr. Baker. Would it be okay if I just jumped in for a moment on a little perspective? Okay. I just wanted to reiterate something that Jamie just said. A great many of us who sit on this board are also parents who have children who avail themselves of these sports and co-curriculars. These are extraordinarily important things to us. We recognize their value and their importance. And I promise you that nobody is dragging their feet or looking to be in any type of, standoff is what seems to be, I believe it was Mr. Romano alluded to. And also the fact of remembering who the customer is. We remember every single minute of every single day who the customer is. That we are living, breathing, and eating who the customer is at this time. Governor Murphy just released, I believe it was yesterday. Was it yesterday that full contact sports that we could engage? Information has been dripped out to us. There was engagement with the union for a sidebar, as was mentioned by Mr. Baker. For fall sports, the way was phased out by the governor to allow, and so that we could responsibly move forward. Whether anybody likes it or not, there is a financial component to this. We're talking about $1.3 million of a budget for stipends. I hate saying it. I did not come on this board to be entrenched in trying to suss out value on the things that we're putting forth. But we are in unprecedented times right now. And the reality is that right now, in this moment, we can do fall sports in the way they should be happening with the proper precautions and protocols. We would like to do that, and we will appoint them as soon as possible. As for every other district, I don't know that that's 100% accurate, and I think we should all be careful about generalizations. And going forward, as Jamie mentioned, everything is being done incrementally. Everything is being done in phases. We have to be responsible about the way we address every aspect of this. As Dr. Dempsey said, there is nothing that is written in stone here. we could be pivoting back and forth between different things. And for us to not recognize in this moment that although, like it was said, yearbook and journalism, those things were executed fabulously remotely and through distance learning. There are things that absolutely will not look the same in distance learning as they do in person. And that is something that we cannot turn away from. That is not something that we can ignore. And we have to make sure that we are being responsible to our budget, to our students, to our community, to our staff, to everyone. There are so many considerations here. Okay, and the idea that we can just unilaterally appoint all the stipends at this moment in time with so many unknowns is, I just want us all to really try and not be emotional and understand what we're looking at. And I just saw a comment pop up that the budget is set for next year. I think we can all acknowledge that the budget that we passed is not really relevant because we did not pass a budget for a pandemic. We have been spending in ways that we did not anticipate. There are going to be additional things that pop up. I just think that we need to be very responsible here. And I'm voicing my view on this. I'm voicing my perspective, knowing all of the different ways that we're looking at this. But the notion that the board does not, for some reason, want fall sports to go forward, we wanted that to happen weeks ago.
Well, Sam, this is Lou. Now that you mentioned my name, I hear you. And that's why when Mr. Baker came out and said what he said earlier, I was a little caught by surprise. A lot of people don't hear that. They don't know that. And yes, I know these are different times, but it's still well past due. If that offer was on the table back then, the customers or the kids, it doesn't matter, between the teachers union and the board. I'm not blaming the board. I'm not blaming the teacher union. Make it happen. You're already getting into August. It's not just the sports, it's the band, it's the everything. I know it's unprecedented times and things are going to be delayed. And I appreciate that you're being good steward of the money, and it's not going to be the same. But again, I was caught by surprise when Mr. Baker fully disclosed and openly and with candor told us exactly what was on the table. Then now we had Mr. McCarron get up, and I see nothing but impasse for a few weeks.
Mr. Romano, I'm sorry, Mr. Romano.
All right.
We're kind of in the response period here, and I don't want to have a back and forth. This is not a back and forth. I asked for everybody's comments. There were no further, and we are responding to the things we're responding to. So this is not a back and forth. Okay, I'm sorry.
Right, that's fair.
I'm sorry. We're trying to explain what we're trying to answer some of your questions and give some responses, but we've taken all of your comments into consideration, and the board will be having, I'm sure, many special meetings in the next month and a half, more so than we would ever have had. And we're willing to do that, and we're willing to do that as soon as things are happening. So please understand we're working very hard on making things happen.
We do understand.
Lynn Weltler, may I make a comment for clarification? I will be very short, I promise.
Lynn, I really think our public comment part is over. I'm sorry.
All right. Okay.
Thank you. Bob, you're on mute.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Can I have a second? Thank you, Janice. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. We will see you soon, I think.
Thanks, everybody. Good evening.